Brothers and sisters, the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "Gird your loins and light your lamps, and be like servants who await their master's return from a wedding, ready to open immediately when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds vigilant on his arrival. Amen, I say to you, he will gird himself, have the servants recline at table, and proceed to wait on them. And should he come in the second or third watch and find them prepared in this way, blessed are those servants. Be sure of this, if the master of the house had known the hour when the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be prepared, for at an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come." The Gospel of the Lord.
The gospel today uses repeatedly a word that, as I mentioned, you don't hear too often, servant. Because the idea of a servant is usually limited these days to people involved in some kind of charitable work. But yet there's also an element of class with that term. Because in some places, in some countries, servants are considered a kind of a luxury enjoyed by the wealthy. But in the gospel today, Jesus reminds us that we are all to live as servants, and the master is the Lord our God. And so just as important is the notion that we are called to be servants to one another. In the early days of the pontificate of Pope Francis, he stressed repeatedly the theme of humility. He spoke of a desire for a poor church and the importance of service. Jesus once said that he came to serve. We have to ask ourselves, how can we best follow the example of Christ as he served? A few years ago, Fortune magazine broke the story of a remarkable gathering of some of the wealthiest men and women of the world. It was organized by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. And Fortune referred to it as the biggest fundraising drive in history. It resulted in something called, quite simply, the Giving Pledge. 40 of the world's wealthiest people, billionaires, not millionaires, wrote letters that were posted online stating that they were pledging to give at least half of their fortune to charity. Names like Barron Hilton, Tom Monahan, Michael Bloomberg, Oprah Winfrey, and so many others. For example, Barron Hilton, a devout Catholic, whose great charity to the poor, especially her kindness and her generosity to religious sisters who worked among the poorest of the poor. Or Tom Monahan, a faith-filled Catholic and owner of the Detroit Tigers and the founder of Domino's Pizza, who was committed to sharing his fortune with a variety of Catholic causes, but in particular, Catholic education. The Giving Pledge is more than just these wealthy men and women's effort, but rather a call to all of us as well. And so are Christ's words in the gospel today truly prophetic for all of us? Store up an inexhaustible treasure in heaven, Jesus has said to us. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be. Be prepared, he says, for the final judgment. And so this follows upon last week's gospel message about splitting of inheritance, because one's life does not consist of possessions, of wealth, of title, but rather Jesus told the crowd, be rich in what matters to God. His words force you and I to ask ourselves, where does our treasures lie? What matters the most to you and me? Looked at in another way, if my life were about to end, what would matter most to me? It's a sobering thought, a sobering question, but it comes to us now for good reason. Because the scriptures that we have heard over the past weeks, every Sunday, speak to us about Christ's journey, a journey to Jerusalem where he would suffer and die. And it's during Christ's journey that we have experienced some of the most dramatic parables in the scriptures, the Good Samaritan story. And they all have a powerful lesson to offer to us, like the encounter of Mary and Martha, or the parable of the teaching of the Our Father, or the sending of the 72 into the world to proclaim the gospel. These are all wonderful, great stories and parables, but when you put them all together, week after week, they indeed are Christ's parting message to all of us. I'm sure many of you probably remember the best-selling book, Tuesdays with Morrie, by Mitch Albom. This young writer reconnects with his teacher who is dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. And across a series of Tuesdays, Mitch learns a valuable lesson about life and about what really matters. And so it is with the scriptures from St. Luke's Gospel these past weekends. And so we need to think and consider this thought, what we have heard. We can call them Sundays with Jesus, his last lessons to us, to you and me, his followers, because they are the lessons as Christ walked to his own death. They teach us about prayer. They teach us about caring for our neighbors, about how we need to care less about what matters in the world and more about what will endure in the next. These lessons are treasures. These lessons are blessings. And so we are called today, be prepared, as Jesus says. And at the conclusion of the gospel, he explains, much will be required of the person entrusted with much, and still more will be demanded of the person entrusted with more. And so Christ speaks to all of us week after week, calling us, speaking to us about what we are called to do. Because the scriptures invite us that Jesus the Christ, the Son of God, has been entrusted with the great treasure. And it is him that we are called to embrace, to know, to love, to follow. And Jesus knew that his time was limited, his days were numbered, and he wanted to go into the world to share the gospel and his story. That's Christ's giving pledge, the giving of himself for you and me, the glory of our inheritance, the cross, the pain, the suffering, the victory. And he pledged his life and he gave it for all of us. And so as we are nurtured day after day, if we come to the table to be strengthened in body broken, blood poured out, that is the treasure. It's not measured in dollars and cents and titles and power, but rather that's what's most important in our lives. Our faith lived, celebrated, and shared, because that's our inheritance, that's our grace, that's our blessing. And so what we need to do is to treasure the words of Christ. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be. And so Christ asks, Where is your treasure? Where is your heart? Now is the time for us to find the answer. Maybe it's our call, our giving pledge to God, our lives, our actions, our kindness, our service, our giving. Christ has shown us the way. May we follow and give as he has given for us.